It all started with a simple message, brief, like a stone tossed into the void. But its meaning lodged itself in his mind like a splinter. A meeting at an old restaurant with a friend, a tense conversation, and a single name that shattered his calm into pieces. Lauren. What once seemed solid was now crumbling under the weight of doubt. Every step forward was an attempt to unravel a tangle of secrets, to break free from a web of lies. Was he ready to uncover the truth? Or was it better to keep believing in the illusion? Fear, jealousy, and truth clashed in a deadly struggle. But no one emerges victorious when reality shatters everything you thought was real. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watch this video from. Now, let's get started. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the soft remnants of daylight spilled through the office window, casting a warm, amber glow across the quiet room. Everything around Jordan was calm, but inside him, chaos brewed. He remained still at his desk, his gaze vacant, eyes fixed on his computer screen, though his mind was miles away. A text had just lit up his phone, a message from Julian, his closest friend. It was terse, unsettling. Need to talk. Can we meet? It's serious. A knot twisted in Jordan's stomach. Julian didn't usually send messages like that. Vague, out of nowhere, with no explanation. That wasn't his style. Jordan's brain raced through countless scenarios, each more uneasy than the last, as he tried to piece together what might be so pressing. 45 minutes later, he was already en route to Sardinos, the familiar restaurant the two of them often visited. When Jordan entered, his eyes immediately landed on Julian seated in the far corner, tucked away from the crowd. Julian wasn't scrolling through his phone like usual. He was staring at the screen, clearly tense, his demeanor unusually tight. Jordan approached, extended a hand, and slid into the seat across from him. "You look rattled," Jordan observed, his voice level despite the tension building beneath his calm surface. "What's going on?" Julian lifted his head, and the concern in his eyes was unmistakable. "I've been turning this over all day. I saw someone this morning, at the hotel. She looked exactly like Lauren." Jordan froze. His brain stuttered at the name. "Wait. Are you sure?" he asked, a tremor betraying his voice. Julian's response was firm. "I'm not guessing. She came out of room 611, then went directly into 614, but you told me she was in 612. Jordan's chest tightened. The information clashed violently with what he thought he knew. "Lauren? No way. She wouldn't do something like that," he muttered under his breath. Then louder, more urgently. "Which hotel?" "The Hyatt downtown," Julian answered quietly. "You okay?" Jordan buried his face in his hands, trying to absorb the blow. It felt like the walls were closing in. "I wasn't sure if telling you was the right move," Julian added, regret flickering in his voice. "But I figured you deserved to know." "Did she notice you?" Jordan asked, his thoughts spiraling faster now. Julian nodded reluctantly. "Yeah, she saw me. But it was weird. Like she didn't recognize me, or didn't want to. She kept her head down. It felt like she was hiding something. It was just too much of a coincidence, me being there too." Jordan's stomach churned, his appetite vanished. The image of Lauren stepping into another room, another man's room, etched itself into his mind like a scar. "What the hell am I supposed to do with that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Julian leaned forward, his tone gentler now. "I don't have the answers, man. But I think you need to find out what's really going on. Whatever it is, I've got your back." Jordan forced a weak smile, more out of habit than anything else. "Thanks. I'll figure it out." He stood and walked away, stepping into the cool night, the conversation echoing in his head. The drive back to his office passed in silence, the streets a blur through the windshield. His thoughts were a maze, tangled and impossible to navigate. Lauren had always felt like a constant, someone he could count on. Now that foundation felt cracked, unstable, maybe even fake. He tried to believe it was all a mix-up, that Julian had seen someone who merely resembled Lauren, that there was a logical reason behind it all. But as he replayed every word of the conversation, doubt crept in, louder each time. Memories began surfacing, small things that hadn't meant much before. Her trips had started lasting longer. Her messages, once warm and detailed, had become clipped, distracted. The timing of her calls often didn't add up, and when he tried to talk late at night, she always seemed too tired. He had brushed it all off as work pressure, but now those excuses felt rehearsed. A growing unease settled deep in his chest and refused to let go. He'd trusted Lauren completely, never second-guessed her. But now, that trust felt fragile, like it was barely holding together. Then his phone buzzed again. This time, it was Samuel, his boss. They knew each other well, even had dinners with their partners from time to time, so Jordan answered without hesitation. "Hey, Jordan," Samuel said casually. "Just double-checking. Didn't you ask me about Lauren's travel info the other day?" Jordan, still wrapped in his swirling thoughts, replied automatically, "Yeah, I thought I had it written down, but I must have misplaced it. Could you have someone confirm it for me?" Samuel agreed easily, and their chat drifted on, light and professional, until a detail at the end hit Jordan like a punch to the gut. "Oh, one more thing," Samuel added offhandedly. Lauren brought Martin Hayes along again. "You know, the new kid, just joined us out of college. She's taken him on the last few supplier trips." Jordan blinked. Martin Hayes? The name meant nothing to him. Lauren had never once mentioned him. The realization that she had traveled 3 times with someone he'd never even heard of slammed into him. Why hadn't she told him? Why hide it? He forced his voice to stay calm as he responded to Samuel, but his mind was unraveling all over again. "Thanks, Samuel. I'm probably overthinking it. Just misplaced the flight details, that's all," Jordan said, attempting a casual chuckle. Samuel laughed lightly. "Man, don't stress. I'm sure everything's fine. Lauren's got it handled. She always does. Don't let it get in your head, all right?" Jordan ended the call, but the uneasy feeling refused to fade. Something about the situation gnawed at him. The fact that Lauren was traveling with someone named Martin, a name he'd never heard her mention before, left him unsettled. He wasn't jumping to conclusions, but a knot had formed in his gut. That night, sleep was impossible. His mind looped the same troubling thoughts over and over. Why had Martin never come up before? And why were they suddenly flying places together all the time? The more Jordan replayed it, the less sense it made. By morning, he was done spinning in circles. He needed clarity. He needed truth. So he devised a plan. He'd go to the airport when she landed. No heads up, no warning. He had to see it for himself. Maybe it was impulsive. Maybe it crossed a line. But it was the only way he'd find peace. Either he was imagining something that wasn't there, or something real was unfolding behind his back. Either way, he couldn't keep guessing. The doubt was choking him, and the silence between them had stretched into something unbearable. He had to know. He pulled into the lot at JFK. The airport buzzed with its usual chaos, announcements echoing, wheels clattering over tile, hurried steps everywhere. But Jordan moved through it like it was underwater. The day was fading, twilight settling in, but in his world, everything felt frozen. Each step toward the terminal felt heavier than the last. His heartbeat thudded in his chest, louder than the overhead calls for boarding or arrival gates. Every thought spiraled around what Julian had said, what it might mean. Was Jordan about to expose the truth, or was he about to tear everything apart for nothing? He tried to calm himself, but the nerves clung tight. The airport's rhythm faded into a blur. All that mattered now was finding Lauren. His eyes scanned the crowd with urgency, darting from one face to another, his mind racing. He felt disconnected, like a shadow drifting through his own life, unsure what he even hoped to discover, but desperate to know something. And then he saw her. She wasn't alone. Jordan froze. The breath caught in his throat. Standing beside her, an arm resting casually across her shoulders, was someone he'd never met, but recognized instantly from what Julian had told him. Martin. The name alone made Jordan's skin crawl now. The closeness between them was impossible to ignore. They were laughing, too familiar, too comfortable. Jordan's feet refused to move as his world skewed out of focus. Time slowed. There was Lauren, smiling. But it wasn't a smile that brought him comfort, and Martin's arm stayed exactly where it was, like it belonged. Jordan's gut twisted violently. His mind scrambled for explanation. Could this really be what Julian had hinted at? Their proximity felt like a blow to the chest. He wanted to turn and walk away, to run from whatever this was before it could do more damage. But he couldn't. Not now. Forcing his legs to move, he stepped forward, one heavy stride at a time. He had to confront it. He had to know the truth. As he neared them, Lauren's eyes caught his. For an instant, the world tilted again. Her expression drained of warmth, replaced by alarm. Guilt flashed across her face, followed by something else he couldn't quite place. The look of someone who had just been exposed and didn't know how to fix it. "Jordan," she breathed, her voice low and trembling. "I didn't know you were coming." He stared at her, stunned and burning with disbelief. How could she let this happen, so openly, so carelessly, with another man? He wanted to scream, to demand answers. But when he spoke, his voice came out quiet, cold, and razor-sharp. "What's going on, Lauren?" The words were low, but they cut deep, filled with all the suspicion and hurt he'd been holding back. Martin instinctively stepped back, discomfort written all over his face. He clearly hadn't expected any of this. For the first time, Jordan saw him not just as a name, but as a real presence, one that might be at the root of all the confusion and hurt. But all his focus remained on Lauren. And who exactly is this? The question came out like a hammer, blunt but direct. Lauren swallowed hard, her eyes wide and panicked. "Jordan, this isn't what it looks like. I promise." Her voice faltered as she tried to gather the right words. "Please let me explain." But Jordan couldn't take any more. The laughter, the closeness, the easy way Martin's hand had rested on her, all of it was too much, too vivid, too undeniable. "No, Lauren," he said, cutting her off, voice tight and final. "I don't need your explanation. I've seen enough." And with that, he turned away. His chest felt like it might tear open, waves of pain and anger crashing together inside him. But just as he took the first few steps, he heard her voice behind him. "Jordan, please, wait." He didn't turn around. He couldn't bear it any longer. The sight of her, the sound of her voice, it was too much. The clamor of the airport faded into a distant hum as he moved through the crowd, his body weaving forward without direction. His thoughts were fragmented, his limbs detached, operating on muscle memory alone. None of it felt grounded. Reality had turned dreamlike, surreal, and hollow. Yet deep inside, Jordan already knew the truth. It was over. The trust they'd once built, the loyalty that had anchored them, had been shattered. And no matter how he turned it over in his mind, there was no undoing it. Not now. Not after everything. By the time he reached the concrete stillness of the parking structure, he slid behind the wheel and started the engine in one fluid motion. The car's steady rumble filled the silence, muting the pain coiling tight in his chest. As the skyline flickered behind him, growing smaller with each mile, he finally let the weight settle. She had betrayed him, the woman he had trusted with everything. That night, he sat alone in a dim room, the light from a small lamp stretching soft shadows along the walls. The stillness around him was suffocating. Time had passed, but the storm inside remained. Nothing had dulled. He had spoken his truth to Lauren. The words had been said, laid bare between them, but they changed nothing. She had crossed a boundary he couldn't overlook, no matter how deeply he wished otherwise. Some part of him still longed to believe in second chances, but forgiveness wasn't something he could simply offer, not when it felt so heavy, so impossible. After the argument, she had left, and she hadn't returned. He hadn't expected her to. He could still picture the look on her face as she walked away, his own expression etched with a sorrow so sharp it felt like a wound. There had been remorse in her eyes, but it didn't soothe the sting of what she'd done. Could their love survive this? The question haunted him, unanswered and relentless. In the days that followed, Jordan threw himself into his work. It was the only thing that gave his mind a break. Still, every quiet moment echoed with memories of her, of what they had been. He would glance down at his hand and remember the way hers had fit into it. That absence, so small and simple, cut the deepest. The world felt distorted, unfamiliar. He no longer recognized the life he was living. Everything felt uncertain. Then, on a gray afternoon, as rain pattered softly against the glass, his phone rang. It was Julian. "Jordan, are you all right?" his friend asked immediately, voice laced with concern. "No," Jordan replied, his voice rough with fatigue. "I'm not okay. I don't even know how to begin. Everything's a mess." He could hear the weariness in his own voice. "Lauren's gone. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can." "Then do something," Julian urged, gently but firmly. "You can't stay stuck here forever. You have to confront it. Whatever's next, it won't come unless you move forward." Jordan exhaled, slow and unsteady. The words struck a nerve, slicing through the fog like lightning. He realized he'd been carrying this burden alone, tangled in guilt and grief that never let go. Maybe he couldn't undo the past, but he could choose what came next. A flicker of resolve sparked inside him. He had to face it. He couldn't keep circling the same pain, waiting for something to magically change. With quiet determination, he made a choice. He would speak to a lawyer. It was time to act. No more limbo. No more hoping for something that wouldn't return. She wouldn't be the reason he unraveled. Sitting across from the attorney days later, the reality hit hard. Questions came one after another. Shared finances, apartment leases, who would keep what. It was final, and it was real. When he stepped back into the apartment afterward, it still felt empty. But the emptiness no longer crushed him. Something inside had shifted. He wasn't clinging anymore. He wasn't pretending. He was finally seeing things clearly. She was gone. And yet, he was still here, still standing. That meant something. He didn't know what tomorrow held, but he was finally ready to face it. He was no longer the man chasing something broken, no longer waiting for someone else to mend what had been lost. He was Jordan, and he was choosing to move forward. Then, on a quiet weekend after the rain had lifted and sunlight spilled through the curtains, the phone rang again. It was Lauren. This time, it wasn't just apologies. Her voice trembled, but there was a difference in her tone. She told him she had started therapy, that she was trying to change. She promised she was done with Martin, that she wanted to be better, not just for him, but for herself. "Jordan," she said softly, "I know I've hurt you, but I don't want to lose you. I want to make this right. I will make it right." He listened. He let her speak. But the words no longer held the same power. He didn't need saving, not by regret or promises. He finally knew who he was. "I can't go back, Lauren," he said quietly, but with certainty. "I can't live inside a lie, but I'll be okay. I'm living for myself now." The call ended, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Jordan didn't feel broken. He felt whole. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was his. He wouldn't let the past define him. Every step from now on would be forward. No more looking back, No more lingering in what had already fallen apart. Everything had changed, but he had found his strength. Sitting once more in the familiar glow of the lamp, shadows stretching gently across the room, he felt the stillness again. This had once been their space, a sanctuary of shared laughter and whispered dreams. Now it was his alone, and somehow that was enough. The past hadn't vanished. Its weight still lingered in the corners, but he had made his choice. He was moving on. What was done couldn't be undone. There was no more room for waiting on something that would never return. Jordan had finally come to terms with the futility of wishing for the past to come back. Lauren was gone. And although the sorrow still lingered beneath the surface, he recognized that he was no longer suffocating like he once had. The anger that had once scorched everything inside him had dulled into something quiet, something numb. It wasn't easy, but it was the only direction left to take. The idea of beginning again, of possibly letting go of the bitterness, didn't feel unreachable anymore. Still, the hurt clung to him, a dense, immovable weight in his chest that tightened every time he thought of her. He buried himself in work, holding on to any distraction that could keep his thoughts from spiraling. But no matter how packed his schedule was, no matter how busy he tried to stay, his mind always drifted back to her, to Lauren, to the look on her face when the truth shattered everything. There was no escaping it. What haunted him wasn't just the betrayal itself. It was the lies, the silence, the dawning realization that the life they'd shared had been built on a foundation that was never real. The trust that once felt unshakable was now broken beyond repair. And deep down, Jordan couldn't tell if it could ever truly be mended. His phone buzzed suddenly, dragging him out of his thoughts. He glanced down. Lauren. His hand froze above the screen, suspended between instinct and resistance. A part of him longed to avoid the sound of her voice, while another part ached to hear what she had to say. The conflict within him was suffocating. When he finally answered, his voice was cold and controlled. "What do you want, Lauren?" "I'm sorry," she said softly, her voice trembling. I need you to hear me. Please." Jordan closed his eyes, a storm of thoughts crashing inside his head. He didn't want to do this again. He didn't want another round of apologies, another speech filled with regret. He'd heard them all before. But something about the way she spoke, raw and pleading, made him pause. "Talk," he said, flat and expressionless. "I've been in therapy," she said, her voice catching. "I know I messed up, completely. But I'm trying to be better. I don't want to lose you, Jordan. I want to make things right. Please, give me another chance." Her words reached him, but they didn't move him the way they once might have. He could hear the sincerity, the heartbreak in her tone, but it wasn't enough. The past couldn't be undone. The scars were too deep. "I'm sorry, Lauren," he said quietly, his voice unwavering. "But I'm not going back. Not to that life. Not to us." On the other end, there was only her soft weeping, filling the silence that followed. Jordan didn't flinch. "You made your choice," he said, his voice firm. "Now I'm making mine. I have to move on." "I'm sorry," she whispered again, her voice barely audible. But it was too late. Sorry wouldn't change anything. He ended the call, letting the stillness settle around him like a blanket. He leaned back in his chair, staring down at the phone in his hand. A strange sense of peace began to rise within him. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had become something he could live with. The path forward was clear now. He had to keep going. There would be no more looking back, no more trying to resurrect something that had died. The future ahead of him didn't include Lauren, not the one he once dreamed of, but it was his to shape. He would rebuild, slowly, deliberately, until the past no longer defined him. And for the first time in a long time, Jordan felt the smallest flicker of hope that maybe, someday, he'd feel whole again. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.